For us, it is not about the numbers, it's about the critical mass
that will uplift this generation and the future generation of Nigerians. He was a man that has sacrificed his life for freedom, for democracy, for rule of law, for unity, for progress and prosperity of our country and of humanity. We will forever continue to appreciate his life of service and sacrifice. Having said that, we should always remind ourselves that it is 20 years since the restoration of democratic rule. This democracy had always reminded us that it was a product of struggle and sacrifice. People laid their lives for this democracy. People were jailed for this democracy. People were exiled for this democracy. So this democracy was a product of struggle, of people who decided to offer themselves as sacrificial lambs to the realization of freedom and the liberation of our country. We will always appreciate Gani's resilience, Gani's struggle, how he was able to inspire a generation of freedom fighters and politicians, how he was able to inspire and cultivate a new generation of activists and freedom fighters who were on the street and in the trenches to battle the military to restore democracy back to our country. Because of Gani, we should always remind ourselves of the fallen heroes in the struggle for democracy. The late Dr. Bekora Saputi, late Frederick Fashewu, Aka Lao Basharu, Abraham Adesanya, Dr. Bala Usman, and several others who are in the great beyond, who fought to disestablish military dictatorship and restore democracy back to our country. Being present here to remember the life of service and sacrifice of Chief Gani Fawehinm is to appreciate also the contribution movement, the oil workers, the Nigerian media have all played a role in freeing our country from military dictatorship and restoring democracy back to our country. Of all, we'll also remember the ultimate sacrifice made by late Chief M.Q. Abiola, who was also part of the struggle. We should also use this event to remember those who are still alive, who have made sacrifices, organizations and individuals, the Campaign for Democracy, the National Conscience, which becomes National Conscience Party, the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, the Civil Liberties Organization, Lupeng and Pengerson, all have contributed to dislodging the military from power and restoring democracy back to our country. Having said that, 20 years after, it will amount to self-deception to say that this was what we fought for, this was what we struggled for, and this was what our fallen heroes laid their lives for. But we will appreciate that our democracy was able to last for 2 decades. First time in the history of our country. That is a great achievement. But we have seen in the last 20 years a reversal those promises, those dreams, and those expectations our people bestow on the people on the position of power since 1999. We have seen how a democratic state is gradually regressing back to autocracy. There is a growing level of intolerance to dissent and criticisms. People in the position of power are becoming uncomfortable with the values, the concept, the philosophies, and the ideals of democracy that usher them into power. Journalists are still arrested and charged for terrorism and sedition. Protesters are still being arrested and jailed. People are still being haunted for expressing their opinion. Court orders are still being disobeyed. And there is a climate of fear in the hearts of Nigerians when it comes to expressing their opinions and views. People who find themselves in the position of power parade themselves as monarchs and kings and infallibles. They have forgotten the very ladder that took them to position of power, which was simply democracy and constitutional process and rule. Democracy has the tendency of sliding to tyranny if citizens refuse to take the road of vigilance. People in the position of power must constantly and consistently be reminded that they are elected into office and they have sworn the oath of office to respect, obey, and uphold the Constitution of the country. And if we go to sleep, this democracy is bound to fail. It is by consistently holding those in the position of power to account and making sure that they toe the line of honor, of democracy, of constitutional rule, that you can protect and defend this democracy. The right to protest is a fundamental right guaranteed by our Constitution, and no government and no individual in government can deny you that right. Secondly, we must accept the fact that our country is failing. The symptoms of a failing state are evident in our nation today. The security apparatus of the state have been overwhelmed and challenged by armed bandits, insurgents, and herdsmen that have today gone beyond acting as insurgents. They have become an alternative government and an authority unto themselves. We have reached a point in the history of our country where bandits are given conditions to our government. We have reached a point in the history of our country where bandits sit down with governors and people in the position of power, tea and crackers, and decide what to do or not what to do. We have reached a point in the history of our country where criminals, rogues, and bandits are in full control of parts of our country and are becoming difficult or impossible to dislodge. Going through the newspapers today on my way to this place, I have read somewhere where bandits or whoever gone to school knows the meaning of bandits, are given conditions for ceasefire, which include the release of their members. Now, you have to differentiate between an armed insurgent group that has a certain philosophy or ideology they are pursuing and say they have a political agenda. You have to differentiate with what you have bandits. This is how low this country has descended. The road from Kaduna to Abuja is less than 150 kilometers, and it is just the outskirts of Abuja. It has become impossible for our countrymen to trek because the kidnappers have taken over that road. In the bushes between Zamfara, Kaduna, and Niger State, the bandits have displaced thousands of villages and have taken over authority in those ungoverned areas. In the thieves and the jukuns, people are dying every day. And in the northeast, the insurgent group that we could have combated 10 years ago have now aligned themselves with an international terror group, the ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And it's becoming difficult for anybody to deal with them. On the last note, the most topical issue today is xenophobia. It is an act of ingratitude for a select few in South Africa, a country that we have labored, sacrificed for their freedom, to have today turned against us and against other Africans. I do not share the view that all the people of South Africa are xenophobes. But of concern is not the unwholesome and disturbing activities of the xenophobes, but the silence and neutrality of those who in South Africa are supposed to have stand up against them. The voices in support of xenophobic violence in South Africa is becoming higher than the voices of those who are against it. If an African can be attacked in Africa, then we are only justifying the unwholesome activities of racist and right-wingers in other parts of the world. But no matter what, African governments, the African Union, must find a solution to xenophobia in South Africa and in all countries in Africa. African Union must initiate a new convention whereby all African countries can sign to it to protect Africans within Africa. Also of importance is that the African Court of Justice, its powers must be broadened to have the jurisdiction of ordering the arrest of anybody in government or out of government and in any country within the continent, and be tried. Xenophobia must be considered as a crime against humanity. Trouble and sacrifice of the likes of Stephen Biko, Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Nelson Mandela, Govan Mbeki, and all those, Ahmed Kathrada, and all those who fought for freedom will be in vain if that very country for which we committed our resources and our lives to free have turned against us. But nevertheless, we must not use xenophobia, despite the anger, to justify the crimes of apartheid. We must also not unleash violence against anybody. The xenophobes in South Africa should not be our guide, and they should not be our compass. We should be on a higher moral ground. It is time to act. It is time to put an end to the killings of Africans in Africa. The dream of our founding fathers, the Ahmed Sekou Touré's, the Thomas Sankaras, the Kwame Nkrumahs, the Samora Michels, the Gamal Abdel Nasser, the Haile Selassies, and all those, Leopold Senghor, all those who fought, Nnamdi Azikiwe, all those who fought for the freedom of our continent, it is spitting on their graves for Africans to be killing Africans. I will use this opportunity to thank the Democratic Socialist Movement for the honor and for the opportunity, despite the hard times, being able to strive hard to bring together all of us here to mark an important day in the history of our country, the day in which an era came to an end and a new began. Chief Gani Fawehinm will continue to live forever in our hearts, in our minds, in our memory. Thank you very much.